Traduit dans une trentaine de pays, Grand Hôtel Europa de l'écrivain néerlandais Ilja Leonard Pfeijffer nous ouvre ses portes en version française aux presses de la Cité, traduit par Françoise, Antoine. Dans cette vaste fresque européenne, entre modernité et histoire, amour et guérison, observation et introspection, le narrateur entrelace les récits, les angles et les tons avec une maîtrise époustouflante. Vous pouvez retrouver une critique écrite sur le site de Bookelicious, il y en a aussi pas mal par ailleurs. En attendant, je vais vous lire la 4e de couverture. Un écrivain néerlandais pose ses valises au Grand Hôtel Europa, un palace à la splendeur délabrée. Il vient de rompre avec son grand amour, Clio, historienne de l'art passionnée, et souhaite coucher sur le papier leur tumultueuse histoire. Si l'écriture est un remède à sa désolation, les autres clients et le personnel de l'hôtel le sont tout autant. Il y a là Abdoul le groom, rescapé d'un naufrage en Méditerranée, Monsieur Montebello, le majordome, nostalgique d'un passé fastueux, un armateur crétois, une poétesse française, et surtout Monsieur Wang, le nouveau propriétaire chinois décidé à rendre l'endroit attractif pour ses congénères. L'interview qui va suivre est un petit peu particulière, puisqu'elle a été conçue comme un genre de making-of. Oui, ce petit reportage qui plonge généralement dans les coulisses de la création d'un album ou d'un film. Sauf qu'en écriture, où il n'y a pas d'image, la dite plongée est beaucoup plus difficile. Comment parvenir à retracer le processus créatif, le trajet de l'idée au chapitre, l'étape de la prise de notes, tous les jalons qui permettent de construire puis de faire progresser l'histoire? Comment approcher l'essence de l'écriture, son processus, sans implanter une puce dans le cerveau de l'écrivain ou de l'écrivaine? Divisé en 3 étapes, genèse, écriture et univers autour du livre, cet entretien pourrait apporter quelques éléments de réponse. Bienvenue donc au Grand Hôtel Europa avec Ilja Leonard Pfeijffer. Thank you, Ilja, for talking about your wonderful European book, Grand Hôtel Europa, which is Grand Hôtel Europa in French. The title of this book makes me think about a little bit about the movie Grand Hôtel Budapest by Wes Anderson, also about the book named Grand Hôtel by a writer named Vicky Bohm. Is it a little bit like a wink that you made? And what are your sources of inspiration?
I know this film by Wes Anderson. It's a wonderful film. I like it very much. But it has not been an inspiration for this book. I didn't have that movie in mind while I was writing this book. The book of Vicky Brown, I've got it here, but I still have to read it. So neither that one was an inspiration for the book. No, actually, the book was born out of a question I've been struggling with for quite some time before writing this book. And this question had everything to do with the fact that about 14 years ago, I moved from the Netherlands to Italy. I live in Genoa now, in the north of Italy. And this translocation had a couple of effects. First of all, gradually, I started to feel a little bit less Dutch, which is only very good for a person. Gradually, I started to feel a little bit more Italian, which is also a very pleasant consequence. But most importantly, I noticed that I started feeling more European. And it was for quite some time that I was asking myself, what does that mean? What does it mean to feel European? What could a European identity be? And it is this personal question that is at the root of the novel Grand Hôtel Europe. And as soon as you start thinking about this question, perhaps you don't even have to think for that long before arriving at a conclusion that a European identity has a lot to do with our relationship with the past. The past that surrounds us everywhere. We live in the midst of monuments and other remains of glorious centuries of the past. And all this past, of course, constitutes our riches. No, we are very proud of it. We feel good about it. But perhaps there's also another side to it. When you spend your entire life surrounded by tangible remains of glorious centuries of the past, sooner or later, it might be tempting to conclude that perhaps the best times are behind us. And this idea of nostalgia, paradoxically, is also a constant factor in European identity. We've always been nostalgic. So I concluded that my novel about Europe must be a novel with a lot of past and a lot of nostalgia. And because also tourism is a very important theme in the book, I thought that the best setting for this book would be a glorious but decayed hotel, the Grand Hotel Europa, that can be seen as a metaphor for the old continent. So it's like with these considerations that I arrived at the idea of this setting of a decadent hotel.
So your inspiration, it comes more from what you observe and what you live from one country to another than from books or writers or essays or any other artistic piece?
Well, this is a book, Grand Hotel Europa is a book that really wants to talk about the present times. It's a novel, it's not an essay, but it's still, it has the pretense of at least posing a couple of very good questions about the times we live in. So it is very much inspired by reality, by the reality of the Europe we live in nowadays. Having said that, of course, it's always also been influenced by other books, and one of the clearest examples is The Magic Mountain of Thomas Mann, which I also mention in the book, because also that is set in a hotel, of course, but it has a very similar theme. It has the theme of a continent in times of transition, the feeling of the end of an era. And my explicit reference to Thomas Mann in the book is meant to draw your attention to that parallel.
Yes, you say it's not an essay. Of course, it's a novel, and I insist because in France we like novels a lot also. And there is at the same time many themes that you dig into, which are very contemporary and very difficult in the European identity, especially immigration, put in parallel with mass tourism. How did you balance actually the balance between reality and fiction?
Yeah, well, it's also talking about that. No, it is actually talking about the balance between reality and fiction. It's talking about how difficult it is to cut a very clear boundary between the two. It's talking about the problematic notion of authenticity, no? Especially in the context of tourism. So I wanted to have a lot of both. I wanted to have a lot of reality in the book and a lot of fiction. So as a result, all the chapters that are in the frame story that are set in the Grand Hotel Europa are set in a very fictional environment. It's also very difficult to say where exactly this Grand Hotel is. And of course, that's all intentional. On the other hand, the chapters that are the flashback and that tell about this love story with Cleo, I really tried to be as precise as possible about the settings. It's all very Googleable. It's all very recognizable setting. And of course, I did that on purpose, yes. And then I think it's very important. I think it's important to think about these themes of when you talk about tourism and immigration, you talk about two sides of globalization. And I think it's very important to think about the future of Europe in the era of globalization and what it means for us and what it means for us personally and all this kind of things. So because I think it's important, I really use every means available to me to talk about this and to grab the reader. So there's the fictional story, but if I need to do a little bit of essay in between, I also do that. And perhaps I put it in the mouth of a character, or perhaps I shape it in the form of a dialogue. I don't want to limit myself to just one genre when other genres can also be helpful to convey the message.
And I suppose it's your first book translated in France, so we have been a few to discover your writing and your personality. And so I've read that you also wrote poetry, but also plays and also articles and also essays. Does it?
Yeah, I do a lot of things, yes.
You practice different genres in your daily
Actually, writing. I started as a poet. My debut was a collection of poems. And then gradually, also because I'm easily bored. So I always want to do something new. So that's already a reason to venture into different genres. But also when I write prose or plays or other genres, I'm still a poet, I think. Because even if I'm telling a story, even if I'm writing a novel, for me, it's very important how I tell it, the language and the rhythm of the language, the musicality of the language. It's always very important. I always pay attention to that. And the wonderful French translation by Françoise Antoine, I cannot really judge it because my French isn't good enough, but people keep assuring me that she did a very excellent job and that a lot of the musicality of the original is maintained in the French.
Well, I don't have any notion of the original language, but I can say that in French, it's really a beautifully written novel with a style very, very thin and very precise, which remains from the beginning to the end. So, and very poetic also.
I'm very glad to hear that. Yeah. Well, that is also really an accomplishment of the translator.
And about the writing itself, I'm actually very curious about the technique, the way you took notes, the way you built this novel, which is a long novel. How do you work?
Yeah, well, I don't make a scheme to begin with. I don't think about the structure before starting to write. I don't. Many writers do that now. They make the scheme with every chapter, what's going to happen, and that kind of things. But that doesn't work for me, because when I'm writing, there are so many new ideas that that are suggested by what I'm writing at the moment that I cannot possibly foresee that before starting to write. So as a result, the writing process is actually a very organical process. I start with a scaringly vague idea, and then gradually this is getting more precise under my hands. In the case of Grand Hotel Europa, the idea was a bit more precise than usually. I knew what I wanted to talk about, but still the story, how the both storylines would exactly develop is something that verified itself during the process. Actually, I like also very much writing like that because it's very stimulating. Mm-hmm. Every day I'm very eager to continue because also I myself am very curious how this story will end.
Yes, you don't have this, as many writers advise young writers to do, to have this precise idea. You just let the writing, your own writing and your own musicality carry you.
Yes, and also the characters carry me. I've said this before in interviews every now and then, and when I say this, people always think that I'm making a joke, but I'm very serious. It happens that, well, it is absolutely not true that I have my characters under control.
I see.
As soon as I start to create them, they start having an own will and an own life, and they start doing things that I don't want them to do, but still I cannot help it. Actually, when that is happening, I'm very happy because it means that the characters take life.
They seem, because they are very, very different one from each other. They are very, in a way, we can think archetypes, but they are really alive, and each one seemed to have his or her own life, and that the narrator just catches sometimes something, but we don't see the, like if you were pulling Muppets or puppets in the novel.
No, it's all because of them. If I attach them to strings, they liberate themselves and throw away the strings. An example was this this character of Montebello, the majordomus. Originally, I thought that he would have a very small, minor role in the novel. And I remember that I was writing the beginning where he made his first entrance. And I was thinking about a name for him. And I happened to be in Florence at that moment. And while I was thinking about a good name for this character, I was outside in a cafe, and I saw at the other side of the street a small shop that was called Montebello. I thought that is a perfect name for my character. And as soon as I gave him this name, Montebello, he was not happy anymore with his minor role. Mm. He kept keeping in the foreground, and in the end, he has a much larger role than I intended for him.
And how much time did you take to write this book? And did you write it in one place or in different places across Europe also?
No, I wrote it, most of it I wrote here in Genoa, and I wrote it very much full time. And it was actually surprisingly quick. I wrote it in 9 months.
Oh, okay.
But of course, there is a long period of thinking that was before that. Now, I already thought about the themes. I talked about it a lot with Stella, my girlfriend. And so in my head, the work was already had already begun long before that. But the actually writing was 9 months.
Yes, you have.
But with the luxury that I really could do it full time. And I really did it. It was like really 8 hours a day, including weekends.
It's a full-time, really full-time job.
Really full-time, yes. I like to write outside. So I like to go out and sit on a terrace, have a coffee and write there with a little notebook. So the entire novel I wrote by hand.
Oh, you don't type it?
Well, first I write it by hand and then I type it.
And do you have two versions, or do you have the later different versions, or do you really have the first one handwritten and then a little bit of work on the typed one?
Yeah, well, I do it every day. No, like the ideal rhythm would be that in the morning I start typing what I've written the day before, and this is already some kind of a rewriting, of course, because I also correct things. And then in the afternoon I make new material by hand, and then the next day I type that and correct that, and then
okay.
So it's going like that.
So it's a personal
I have these small
routine.
notebooks. They are here on my desk, so I can show you.
It's a Moleskine Moleskine notebook.
Yes, the Moleskine, the classical snob. Let's see. There's this handwriting.
Oh, amazing!
This is not Grand Hotel Europa. This is something else. But anyway, and I have a very special lucky pen. I can also show you. There's this.
Oh yes.
Delta fountain pen.
Yes.
Very beautiful.
Really, really beautiful. Very like the image we could have in the 19th century of writers.
Yes, exactly. Because there's a lot of 19th century atmosphere in Grand Hotel Europa. I needed a pen like that, of course.
Yeah, there is this balance also, which is very surprising as long as we dive into your book. It's at the same time very contemporary with the problems you talk about, the thematics and all these different aspects, but also very the writing of a 19th century gentleman who would travel across Europe. How did you mix this not to look too old school? Because it's not.
Yeah, well, I wanted to be a little bit old school because the book is very much talking about that. No, it's talking about nostalgia, about the past, and especially in the chapters that are set in the Grand Hotel, I wanted to have this almost 19th century smell, this atmosphere, and I also tried to evoke that stylistically. At the same time, it's talking very much about today. So, yeah, it's a balance. The balance is also dividing it into two settings. No, it's the Grand Hotel Europa is a bit more old-fashioned, deliberately, and then in the other chapters we're talking about today.
And there is also a character that appeared in your book, which is art, especially all the masterpieces you quote when the narrator is in Italy. What is your relation to art connected to the themes of your book, especially?
Yeah, there's this storyline about Caravaggio, the narrator who looks a bit like me, and Clio, the love of his life. She's an art historian, and there is this mystery of the last painting of Caravaggio, the mystery where it is. And this is all connected with the mystery of Caravaggio's death in 1610. And they are going to look for that painting and trying to resolve the mystery of the death of Caravaggio. And there are a couple of scenes where they try to do that. I wanted to have that because I wanted to make clear that both of them, the narrator and Clio, have also very strong connections with the past. And when the narrator is looking back on this love story and he's telling about it, and he's telling about these episodes in which they are going to look for the painting of Caravaggio, he realizes that those were perhaps the most happy moments of their relationship. they were happy when they could go on a holiday in the past, trying to resolve a murder mystery from 1610. So actually, I knew when I was writing this novel, I knew that I needed some kind of art mystery. I really wanted that. And then I went to look for it, and Caravaggio, of course, is wonderful, because there's also this very spectacular biography of Caravaggio. So it is also a very good story to tell. So I was very happy when I found that.
And what is your opinion about the contemporary European literature, and how would you define your style and your writing in this very wide landscape?
Well, that's a very big question. I'm not sure if I can answer that. I wouldn't pretend to have an overview over contemporary European literature.
Or for example, the writers you could like or work with or appreciate, or...
Yes, the writers I appreciate, the writers I know are already very different between themselves. So it's very difficult. And I don't think that I am in the best position to judge that. What is my position in this landscape? It's very difficult to reflect on your own position in a landscape like that. I do what I have to do. No? There's the urgency of the stories I need to tell, and I don't have time to think about what that means for my position in contemporary literature. I think critics are better equipped to answer your question than I am.
But critics often have the same, the same guidelines, and we never know when we put a punchline on a writer, on a style. We never know if the writer agrees with this idea. So that's why I found it interesting to ask a writer what he thinks about this kind of ideas.
Yes, but it's really very difficult to answer that. Perhaps it's already a bit easier when you ask it for a book, because every book is different. No? In Grand Hotel Europa, there is this rather Baroque style, which is overdone, exaggerated when you compare it to my other books, but it has a reason. It is because I want to talk about nostalgia and the connection with the past and that kind of thing. So on the basis of this one book, you could say that I am a neo-Baroque writer, but when you take another book where I wanted to do different things, it's already different, no? And I hope that the next book will be, again, totally different.
It's something, because it's your first book translated into French. So it's the first book that we French reader know from you. How would you qualify? All of your books have different style, actually, especially your novels?
Yes, a little bit, yes. Well, in the end, I think you can always recognize that it's me, but still, when the books have different themes, different characters, also the style changes. Actually, I don't believe this myth. Every now and then you hear that now, that a writer must find his own style or her own style. I don't believe that at all. I think that every book needs its own style. Perhaps every character needs his or her own style. So as a writer, you must find not one style, but as many styles as possible. It's like a palette of a painter. Now you need all the colors, not just one color. And you use whatever is necessary at the moment.
What are you writing? show notes to end this interview. What are you working on? Are you writing a new book at the moment, or just taking notes?
Well, actually, I just finished a new book, a small book, which will appear in the Netherlands in April. It's a small novel, 96 pages, story about an older woman who is going to Italy to find traces of her memories of her first love. Mm. A small romantic story. But it's interesting because it is a book I wrote for the National Book Week, which is something we have in Holland. It has a very long tradition. Every year there's the National Book Week, and part of the Book Week is the Book Week gift. So every year they ask a writer to write, especially for the Book Week, a small novel that they then give away for free when people buy for like 20 euros of books during that week. I think Holland is the only country who has something like that, but it has a very long tradition. The first Book Week gift was 1930, I think, and all the great writers of the last decades have contributed to this series. So it's really a great honor that this year they asked me. So this is a small novel that is printed in 800,000 copies because it's given away for free. So it's quite impressive.
Really?
And I just finished that, and I started now a new project, a new hopelessly big project, which I'm regretting already. Something completely new, which I never did before. I'm trying to write a historical novel. Oh. A novel set in the past. Mm-hmm. And actually it's set in ancient Greece.
Ah, it's a real past.
Real past, yes. Before Christ even, yes. Yeah. And I want to talk about the end of democracy, which was something that happened in Athens in the 5th century before Christ, and perhaps is happening right now to us, but we don't notice it. Yes. So I want to talk about that. So it is a book about the past, but I think it has a relevance for us today.
Yes, you have this in Grand Hotel Europa. You have this balance, as we talked about, between past and present. Is it something you often write about? This, how the past can enlighten our present or give us clues to understand it?
Well, that's in Grand Hotel Europa. It's very much like that. That's one of the themes of the book. Now I'm doing that again with a historical novel, but in a different way. Mm-hmm. But actually, it's not something I always do. Actually, my first novels are not so much topical. They're not so much talking about present day themes as my last novels. Then actually, I think actuality is to blame. There are so many things happening in the world today that are important and concerning that I find it increasingly difficult not to talk about them. So actuality is putting itself on the foreground.
So I hope it will be, at the same time, I hope actuality will not be too heavy. So like these writers can think about other things they would like more. And also at the same time, it can help people to understand a little bit more the world they live in, maybe.
at least let us ask a couple of very good questions. Even if we don't have the answers, let that be our first task.
So this is a nice way to end our interview. Thank you very much for your time and for these answers about your book Grand Hôtel Europa, published at Presse de la Cité.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure.